Hyvää iltapäivää, hyvä Night Visions-yleisö, jota olemme jo illan puolella. Ilo toivottaa teidät kaikki tervetulleeksi katsomaan John McTiernanin elokuvaa Punaisen lokakuun metsästys. Oman aikansa poliittisen jännityksen toiminnan ja ennen kaikkea sukellusvene-elokuvan klassikko, jota ei ole kankalta nähty pitkään aikaan. Näytös tulee 35 millin filmiltä, jota lähteen juuri kertoi, että kunnon pitäisi olla erinomainen. Onnea myös, että olette saaneet lipun. Tämähän on loppuun myyty ja niinhän ovat nämä seuraavatkin herra McTiernanin esitykset. Before we start the screening, please give a very warm welcome to our guest of honor, Mr. John McTiernan.
Is this actually a stage theater? I mean, there's an orchestra pit here.
It's just a very old theater. It was used already, I think, when it was the silent era, so it has been orchestral, but it's built for cinema purposes. One of the finest we have. Well, everybody knows you as a director who have started many franchises. This is sort of start of a franchise as well. It's the first adaptation of a Tom Clancy novel and the first appearance of character Jack Ryan. When did the book, which was the first one that Clancy wrote back in 1984 already, when did the book caught your attention?
I was working in England and I happened to see it because I love sea stories. And I immediately, I don't know, I read like half of it or something, and I started calling, how do I get hold of this book? And the day before, it turned out it had been sold to somebody else. The movie rights had been sold. It wasn't the first thing he wrote. Patriot Game, and maybe one other that were published afterward, actually. Well, I'd written before. What's his name? The Patrick O'Brien. The Patrick O'Brien series of sea stories. The Master and Commander is supposedly his first book. Oh no, he'd written several before, like it, while he was working out the format. Anyway. Did I answer your question?
In a way.
In a way.
It's
a language difficulty, you see. I have difficulty with English.
It's a Cold War film. When it came out, there was no more Cold War, and things had changed. Were changing quite rapidly. Did this somehow affect in the way you approached the book? Approached the story?
Well, it wasn't quite a Cold War film. It was about the end of the Cold War, or about an event which was a, say, crack in the ice of the Cold War. I think what Tom had in mind was that he felt that the end of the Cold War was coming, and he wrote a book that was sort of about that. And then events overtook him. It happened faster than he thought. But it was never, I don't know. When you say Cold War movie, I think of, I don't know if you remember these, things like 7 Days in May, and stories that are about, oh dear, we're all going to get blown up. An aside on that is, if they let the Russians win in the Ukraine, we're going to be back to the Cold War. Remember that and tell your politicians. Tell American politicians, please. You know, you can write to American politicians, and they'll actually listen. You'd be surprised. Sorry, that's way off the topic. I apologize. Anyway, I never wanted it to be about, oh dear, we're going to get blown up. It's about a young man who has the courage to see beyond warlike visions. It's about a young man who has the courage to say we can make peace. And in a way, it was perhaps new, or a new sort of hero story at the time. You know, because what it's basically saying is, you know, there's this young man with a lot of courage who is saying, all the Russians aren't crazy people. There are good people there, and we can work out how to live in harmony, or at least, you know, not worrying that we're going to kill each other.
He's a new kind of hero once again. He is a sort of man of action, but he's more an intellectual. Like his main way of operating is through analyzing stuff. So once again, you created a new kind of action character, maybe in a way.
I don't know if it was new, but it just. I mean, golly, how many of us actually spend time in a war, or shooting other people for a living, or, you know, out doing action? We spend our lives struggling, working desperately hard sometimes for intellectual things. And you know, it's silly to say that the only men and women who have any courage are the ones who, you know, are somewhere in Never Land fighting with guns. Why couldn't we make stories about people sort of like us, who, you know, went to college and then get a job, and in the middle of the job, they're faced with something that's difficult and scary, and takes some fortitude and courage. But in an environment that's, you know, somewhat like what the rest of us live in. Shouldn't those be the hero stories we're telling?
Alec Baldwin really won this one over, like it's launched his career in a big way, but I understand he wasn't the first choice for Jack Ryan. It supposedly was Kevin Costner, and Klaus Maria Brandauer was your pick for the Remus character. Can you tell us about what's changed in the casting process?
I don't know that those were my picks. Those were just, there's a lot of stories and nonsense that goes around, that sort of stuff.
That's why we have you here.
Okay. Yes, Klaus Maria Brandauer was talked about. Loads of other people were talked about. That's what happens at the beginning of a movie. There's all sorts of people talking about this guy and that guy, and agents calling up, whispering to so-and-so, oh, you ought to get blah, 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 and have him do it, he'd be great. That sort of stuff, you know, that's how the poor Belgian gentleman got cast as the monster in Predator.
Thanks to his brilliant agent.
Yes. And that whole period of, at the beginning of a movie, of all sorts of people running around saying, we're going to do it with so-and-so, we should do it with so-and-so, we should do it, you know, it's a free-for-all.
Die Hard was action in confined space. This is action even in more confined space. Not the same kind of action, of course, but how was the submarine settings to build up, and what kind of surrounding it was for you? It's very intensive. When you look at the result, I mean.
I don't know, it wasn't, or I don't know, we only spent one day actually shooting in a real submarine. And that was really hard, because it was so tight. It was an old submarine, it's very small. But I don't know. Maybe they gave me the job because they said, oh, he's really good with confined spaces. People do really dumb stuff, you know. I wanted to do it because I've always loved Navy stories. My first picture I almost really ever remember was at my grandparents' house. I was next to the bed in their bedroom, and it was this guy with a handlebar mustache. And, you know, hold this. Oh, you can't, that doesn't work. Anyway, with a handlebar mustache, and he had a great big leather coat on. And he was standing like this, in front, underneath the guns of a giant battleship. And the battleship was the Arizona, which was 20 years later sunk in Pearl Harbor. But this was 1918, and the crazy guy with the big mustache was the old man who was my grandfather. I mean, I thought he was an old guy, but here was this crazy, cocky guy standing there with a big coat on. And he was a young lieutenant on the Arizona when it was brand new, and came to Le Havre, and that's where the picture was taken. And then my father was in the Navy too. He was on the first destroyer that went into Tokyo Harbor. He didn't ever tell me that. I looked it up and found out later. Okay. So I always loved sea stories and always wanted to do them. And there was, you know, a form in the United States, at least, that military men had to be depicted as stupid and mean and out to start wars. When at least the Navy men that I'd been around, my father was disabled in the war, so he was never discharged. He was just retired. He was the world's oldest junior lieutenant. And to travel, because what had happened was he lost his sight in the war, and just really not a lot of money. And we used to travel by going to military bases and staying. And I remember it in the late, when was it? It'd be mostly like the late 1960s and things. And it was a time of great upheaval in the United States, all over, and people troubled, and sort of, there's a basic feeling of, oh, you don't want to have kids, it's a bad world to bring kids into. And I'd been going to stay on these military bases, and there were all these perfectly intelligent, well-educated Navy bases, well-educated, decent people, and they were all having kids, because they believed in the world. They had confidence in the future. They said, this is a world I can bring kids into. And that kind of stuck in my memory. It seemed like they were a group of people with pretty good information.
I'll wrap this up by asking that was there never a discussion with Sean Connery about him trying to do a Russian accent? Because he is the most Scottish sounding Russian guy ever on screen.
I don't know if we ever talked. I didn't talk to him. Yeah, I did, sure. Mostly there was a talk with the studio executives before, and I just said that, look, as long as he doesn't sound like an American, it'll work fine. Well, for an American audience, anybody who doesn't sound like Americans can sound like whatever, you know? If it's supposed to be a German general, if he's got an English accent, it's fine. No, it really works. I mean, I don't know what you guys think of it. You may think it's ridiculous, but, you know, 30 years ago, movie studios didn't give a shit what people all over the rest of the world thought. They only wanted the American audience. Now they pay attention because the rest of the world is a much bigger market. But at the time, all I had to do was kind of assure them that, at least in America, if he's got a foreign accent, it doesn't matter. It's, you know, he's a foreigner.
Foreign is foreign.
Yeah, it's just foreign, and it's okay. And I had to play those games with, well, you'll see it, with changing languages. Not just change the language once, but then change it back, and then change it a third time in the movie. That was really a stunt I was showing off, actually. But have we filled up enough time?
We'll continue tomorrow.
Have a good time with this.
Enjoy.
It's a pretty good movie.